Okay, everyone, this is my spoiler review of the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 2. Like always, I'm going to break down my review into every separate group we see in the episode, and we'll go one by one. But I do want to mention that first shot of the episode, which is kind of haunting, where it almost feels like it's from somebody's perspective swimming in the ocean looking on the resort at nighttime with the waves. It could also not be a perspective shot, and it could be a shot that's just showing you a cool visual from out in the ocean. Who knows? But it is pretty sinister. Now, let's start with the three best friends here with Kate, Jaclyn, and Laurie. And what we really see in this episode is what I was talking about last episode, where the sociology is always off when you have three people hanging out because you always get team ups, but you also get gossip too on the other end of that. So you'll see the gossip happening inside of this group. And we see it first from the angle of Kate and Jaclyn talking about Laurie, actually where we left off too, where she had gone upstairs and they were still talking about her. They first started off like they're talking about how great she is, but then they talk about her recent divorce and how much her husband sucked her dry and how the divorce affected her daughter, Ellie. And then you see Kate's like she was kicked out of two schools. She even throws furniture, she heard, and doesn't get raising kids in New York like Laurie does. Laurie also defines herself about her work, Jaclyn brings up, and how she thinks she didn't get the promotion she was always talking about. And that's when Kate's like, no wonder she looks defeated. And they're like, I just worry about her. And at that moment, you get the Laurie jump scare. That scares them and scares us, the audience. But it's actually interesting because when they show Laurie, you don't know if she heard a little more before that. Like they kind of allude to later on when Jaclyn hears Laurie and Kate talking about her, that you're wondering how much she actually heard. But that's kind of left open there as well. And you love how fake it is when she comes back in and Jaclyn's like, we were just talking about how great you look. So they're going to have their biomarker test with Valentine in this episode. And you see that the other two are encouraging Laurie to go for it with Valentine. Now, they're setting that up, but they're also in the show classically setting up because possibly to be somebody who divides the three of them even more as the show goes on. And with Laurie's test results, Valentine says these numbers could be of a woman half your age, but then when Laurie and Jaclyn talk about their experiences, they realize they got the same answers, that both of their fat masses are under 25%, which Jaclyn was also rudely a little surprised at with Laurie. And both of them told they had the results of a woman half their age, but you see that Kate didn't get that all her results were average. So it makes you wonder about this character of Valentine. Is he selective in choosing who he tells that to? Is he telling that to a woman he's attracted to, and maybe Kate he's not? That's kind of what I'm guessing at the moment. Now, we learned about Jaclyn that she's dating someone 10 years younger, this man Harrison, and they're addicted to each other. But you see how Laurie brings up it's only been a year, and it seems like from how they're reacting to it that she's been down this road before and they're not taking it as excited or seriously as Jaclyn is. So at night, Jaclyn is looking at Srutala's book, and it's like her, an actress, but she's seeing the back, how young she used to look and how beautiful she was and how she's gotten older, something that is going to be a theme with these three about aging that you see these characters fear. So there is a connection there in her to that book. So I'm curious what that book is going to have an effect on Jaclyn. But you see, while she's looking at it, that's when Laurie and Kate start talking about her. And Laurie's like, she's so competitive. And then they even call her a narcissist. And then Kate's like, in the vanity, did she sandblast her face or something? It's very waxy. And they even bring up, I think she's lonely because they know probably the husband and her never see each other. And Kate says, I think it's just a front. You know what they say about fronts, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. So she thinks that a lot of this is just a facade that Jaclyn puts on about her joy in her marriage, her fame lifestyle, and that there's a lot of actual hurt and suffering behind it all. And this is the part I think Jaclyn hears, and Jaclyn hears it and walks the other way. So we'll see how, if they are alluding that Jaclyn heard them talking about each other and then that Laurie might have heard the other two talking about her, how that's going to have resentment built between these three who haven't seen each other in a while. So we'll see how that goes and how Valentine falls into that mix. Now with the Ratliffes, who are absolutely insane and definitely the best storyline at the moment, consistently from episode 1 to 2. I don't think there was any drop off here. I think it's only been getting better. But Saxon is sleeping nude way too comfortably in front of his younger brother, and Saxon is just a strange character, which makes him very interesting. And I would love to learn more about Victoria and how she behaves with people. And that happens here with Kate. When Kate says hi to her at breakfast and recognizes her from a baby shower 10 years ago. And Victoria literally gives her nothing back. And that's when Lachlan calls his mom out. It's like, you're kind of rude there, standoffish. And Victoria's like, the baby shower is 10 years ago. I'm on vacation with my family. I don't know her. So it's really fascinating seeing the dynamic of this family and how they're so similar, but at the same time, they're all kind of very different in their own ways. And even when Saxon brings up that, well, at least Kate's friend is this famous actress, Victoria says to that, actresses are basically prostitutes if they're lucky. So you're seeing her views on different things and how cold she can be. Now we'll see them go on their different relaxation moments here with massages and yoga. And I love Victoria takes pills before the massage because she gets claustrophobic. And Piper's getting checked out by one of those LBHs, losers back home at yoga, which was really creepy. And Saxon, of course, has an erection during his massage. And he's mad later on that there was no happy ending, of course. And while this is all happening, Timothy's getting more and more bad news that the Washington Post is also going to cover his scheme now and what he might be in huge trouble for. And you see the resort worker ask him if he's sure he doesn't want to be free of his phone for the week. And he says, I'm sure it would be a relief if you stopped asking me. And Jason Isaacs is playing this rude rich man perfectly. Like, I'm blown away. I think he's right now my favorite performance as well of the show. It's like too good and too accurate. But it makes me wonder, hearing those things, that maybe his reaction to all this is actually just in a Hail Mary situation, avoiding it altogether and actually listening to this woman with everything going on with him. We'll see. But on the hammocks, we get Lachlan and we get Piper. And he says he tried to pray in the deprivation tank but felt like he was talking to himself. And she says, well, when I pray, I feel a presence. And he's like, don't you feel like that's wishful thinking? And she just says, it's real, like shuts him down completely. So like this theme's been with Lachlan, he's just in the middle of everybody. He's always in the middle, and he's in the middle with these totally different belief systems of Piper and his brother Saxon. And then he brings up that Saxon said that Piper never had sex, and he said it's weird because you're so hot, but he meant it like a compliment. And then she's like freaked out by this, calls him a freak, and it is very weird. So rightfully she has the right reaction. And I love Lachlan still goes, well, have you though? And then she just goes away. That was really funny. And I feel like Lachlan's more likable characters right now, and you can try to kind of always guess what character is more in the Mike White style of like maybe something he came from. And I feel like Lachlan right now has a little bit of those Mike White type character vibes. Now at dinner, Saxon is checking out the waitress, and Lachlan goes, Dad, are they woman? And Saxon says, well, you know what they say, having sex in Thailand is like eating a box of chocolates. You never know which one's going to have nuts. The laugh he does after that, Patrick Schwarzenegger, is so good. It is hysterical. It had me dying. And you see that Victoria laughs at every joke he makes too, so she's just as immature as him. But you see Piper's very annoyed by this. And then she takes this moment to tell him how he should stay out of her personal life, and you see that tension already built. And then it's going to be weird because then Saxon knows Lachlan said something to her, so we'll see how that all goes the next episode. And you see Victoria tells the family, though, not to fight, and she's like, you're all gorgeous and come from money. You have to be on your guard. So it's that family mentality, that class mentality she's talking about, always protecting at the end of the day, even if we fight within each other. And she brings up a story about her older brother holding spit above her, then sucking it in. And she says, I hated him for years, and now we're really close. So she's also justifying Saxon and Piper, like not even giving Piper the opening to talk about what's wrong. Just kind of like, just get along no matter what's really going on. Not great parenting. Now, Timothy finally gets a hold of Kenny. And when he's talking to Kenny on the phone, this is definitely Kei Kwan. Like, who else has that exact voice? Maybe I'm wrong, but I really think that's him. He says 20 FBI agents raided his office. And you see how pissed Timothy is. He's like, you swore this wouldn't happen. Then he asks, am I implicated? He says, yes, for sure, Tim, yes. And that's when he really freaks out. He's like, this was all you. This was a favor. He's complaining he only made $10 million out of the scheme, and now he's wrapped in money laundering. And he says, if you F me out of this, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, well, if it makes you feel better, I'm going to kill myself. So this guy, on the end, Kenny's threatening, doesn't really care. He has nothing else to lose at this point. And he says, good, do it, you piece of S. And I love when you see at the end of the night when Timothy is getting a lawyer set up, that you have Lachlan telling the story to his family of a girl warning about a tsunami coming and no one listening. And you just wonder, this tsunami's now going to hit with the Ratliffes, and I think it's going to really crank up next episode. And this has definitely been the best story this season so far, and with good forward momentum. And I think it's just going to keep going that way because it's just getting better and better. Now, we'll go to Mook and Guy Talk. Guy Talk sets up a lunch. And he tells Mook, I like you. And he's saying how they're in the same town, the families are close, they work at the same hotel. This is like everything that would not be sexy to someone you're trying to get as a partner. And he's like, I'm not a genius, but I'm pretty handy. He reminds me a lot of Albie from season 2. Like, this is totally a nice guy doing things that are a little like cringe. Even when he's like, we can go on a date tonight. And he's like, every night. And that's when she's like, don't be weird, Guy Talk. Come on, eat your lunch. So we'll see where that goes with them, but you'll see she is worried about him later on after the incident with the shoplifting, which makes his day basically. Like, he turns it around and he's so happy about it. But like we saw with Mook, she definitely seemed more into the idea of travel and those security guards. So I don't think this is something that's actually a match. It's also interesting when Valentine invites Guy Talk to the fight, he's also letting the shoplifter in who robs the shop. Like, he kind of waves at the car, but he's distracted. And he actually gets pistol whipped by the guy on the way out. And that person had another accomplice. We see the back of their head for a second, but we don't know who it is. And we'll get more to that shoplifting scene in a moment. So we'll go over to Rick and Chelsea's storyline. Now, Chelsea signed Rick up for a stress management session with Dr. Amrita. And she also informs him she set them up with a dinner with a couple. And she says the man is old and bald. And he's like, you're old and you're going bald. And while this is happening, you see Rick is eyeing the hotel manager. Now, we get to learn more about Rick through his stress session. And he says he's at a level 8 of stress. And he's like, I could use some weed. And Amrita asks him, can you remember a time in your life totally free of stress? He brings up his backstory, that his mother was a drug addict, OD'd when he was 10, and he never knew his father died before he was born, and he was murdered. So that, to me, tells me it's kind of like a Sawyer storyline from Lost, where maybe he is looking for the hotel manager husband, and that man is someone involved with maybe his father's murder. And that's why he's so mysterious about it, even with Chelsea. And that he's trying to get some kind of revenge. Now, I really like this writing where Amrita says meditation helps you see that the identity you have created brings you suffering. And I'd mentioned in the last review, they had another line about identity in the show and how that is going to be a big theme of this season because they keep bringing it up. And he says, well, I never had an identity. I'm nothing. And she says, even nothing can be an illusion you tell yourself. So it's going to that awakening that a character like Rick, I believe, is getting set up to have, that he isn't nothing and he isn't this cold, just walking, living body. Like, there's more to him and that he has to give himself that chance. I think it's going to be everyone's identity kind of explored here in this season, and the idea of it and our perceptions of ourselves. Now, Chelsea and Chloe will go to the shop and someone shoplifts. So I think it's like the earliest in any White Lotus season we see some sort of crime besides obviously the in the future timeline murders we get in the beginning. And the shoplifter takes the snake choker Chelsea liked. So that's going to be important because they kept showing that in the camera and making a point of her liking that snake choker. So I think that would be something in solving who the shoplifter was and eventually connecting to the murder later in the season. And now they go on a double date with Chloe and Craig. And Chelsea's pushing Rick to small talk Greg. And they're both doing this and that. And he learns he met Chloe through a matchmaking service. And then you see that Greg thinks she is French. And she's like, I'm Canadian. I'm from Quebec. It doesn't mean I'm French. So you see how bad their relationship is. And I love in the bedroom later, Chelsea says she likes their new friends and that Chloe is so pretty. And the way Walton Goggins says to her, she's a hooker. They met on a matchmaking service in Dubai. And Chelsea's like, she was a model in France. She walked the Paris runway. So there is a part of Chelsea too that is just eternally optimistic about everything to the point where it's too much, where it's like, okay, but let's see the real situation that's here and not make it all fairy tale all the time. But like I said, she does know deep down what's going on. Like, she's not an idiot. I think she's just choosing to always look at the more optimistic angle of everything, including the man she's dating. But we see that Rick had heard when Sarlata performed, after her talking to the three best friends, that she says she's leaving for Bangkok. That's where her husband lives. And Rick overhears that. So he tells Chelsea, I might have to go to Bangkok for a night or two. And she's like so mysterious. So that part of him, she's out of the loop on, as is the audience. So I feel like next episode, hopefully, we'll get a lot out of that too. And I think that's the other stronger storyline right now in the show with Chelsea and Rick and getting better forward momentum. At least this episode, because I think in the first one there wasn't much, but now we're getting it. So we'll end off with Belinda, who is getting a warrior massage from Porn Chai, which is like top notch. She loves it. And then when she goes to do her massage, he comes in and she's swooning over him and he's like, "How would you like me? On my back or on my stomach?" And she goes, "On my stomach." "Not my stomach, your stomach." That was so funny. Natasha Rothwell is so funny. I don't know if you've seen Sonic 2, but she's in that and she steals the movie somehow. It was great. And now Belinda will also see Greg, and I don't think she quite recognizes, like, she thinks it's him, but she's like, no, like the way she looks, like it can't be. Like, is that guy that Tanya was seeing? So I think that's interesting too, because that's just showing you she's going to be the one that will obviously eventually connect the dots about it being Greg and that connection to Tanya. So we'll see what happens with that. But overall, I'm going to give this episode a 7.8. I think it was good, but if I just, again, look back, the first two episodes of each White Lotus season are not the best, and I think that just continues here. Like, it's always really, really slow, and it's interesting because you have interesting characters, which is great. There's some setup going on, but you're not getting, like, the big conflicts yet, and that will start happening, I think, next episode. If we're looking at the past seasons, that's what happens with Mike White. Like, if I look back, I absolutely love the second half of all of his seasons of White Lotus, so I think that's going to happen here too. I have no doubt in my mind of that. So I'm still very invested knowing who's doing this. But honestly, it's still just slow going for me. And the humor could be a little more, I think. I think there could be more funny moments where I'll give credit to the past seasons where I definitely was laughing a little bit more than this season. So I still have faith. I'm still excited, but I wasn't like crazy about this episode in particular. I thought it was good, but ultimately forgettable. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment. Try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you don't miss one of my reviews of White Lotus. I'm also doing Severance as well, and I'll see you next time.